The day I walked in to sign my divorce papers, I thought I already knew what heartbreak looked like. I was wrong. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows of the downtown law office as I stepped out of the elevator and adjusted my coat over my swollen belly. 7 months pregnant and exhausted from carrying more secrets than any person should have to carry, I kept my eyes on the marble floor and reminded myself why I was here. This was supposed to be the end. One signature. One goodbye. One final step toward a life where Ethan Nakamura no longer occupied every corner of my thoughts. The receptionist offered a polite smile and pointed me toward the conference room. My stomach tightened with every step. 2 years. 2 years since I had last seen my husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband. 2 years since I had walked away from a world built on power, influence, and impossible expectations. I paused outside the door and took a slow breath before pushing it open. Ethan was already there. Of course he was. He sat at the far end of the long oak table wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His posture was flawless. He looked exactly the same. That somehow made everything worse. He didn't look up when I entered. His attention remained fixed on the documents in front of him, as if this were just another business meeting. Just another contract. Just another transaction. My chest ached, but I forced myself to remain calm. The attorney greeted me and motioned toward the empty chair across from Ethan. I sat down carefully, resting one hand against my belly. The room felt colder than it should have. For several long seconds nobody spoke. Pages shuffled. Pens clicked. Air conditioning hummed overhead. Then the door behind me opened again. Small footsteps crossed the room. My heart skipped. Noah. My 5-year-old son peeked around the corner holding the hand of my friend Danielle, who had promised to watch him while I finished the paperwork. He wasn't supposed to come inside. I had told him to wait. But Noah had never been very good at following plans. "Mom?" he asked softly. The sound froze the entire room. My pulse immediately accelerated. Danielle looked mortified. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He slipped away before I could stop him. I turned toward Noah and offered the reassuring smile I always saved for him. "It's okay, sweetheart." But before I could stand, something shifted across the table. Ethan finally looked up. At first his expression remained neutral. Then his eyes landed on Noah. The change was immediate. The color drained from his face. The pen slipped from his fingers and rolled slowly across the polished table. Silence swallowed the room. Noah stared back curiously, completely unaware of the storm unfolding around him. Ethan's gaze moved over the little boy's face. His dark hair. His features. His eyes. The same eyes people had once said mirrored Ethan's perfectly. My breath caught in my throat, because in that moment I realized exactly what he was seeing. And for the first time in 2 years, Ethan Nakamura looked genuinely afraid. Noah shifted his weight from one sneaker to the other, and looked around the conference room with the fearless curiosity only a child could possess. He did not notice the stunned silence. He did not notice the attorney staring at Ethan. He certainly did not notice the way my entire body had gone rigid. To him, this was just another room full of adults having another boring conversation. "Mom, are we leaving soon?" he asked. His small voice seemed impossibly loud. I forced myself to stand, grateful for the excuse to break the tension. "In a few minutes, sweetheart." I reached for his hand, but before I could guide him back toward the hallway, Ethan spoke. The sound of his voice startled me more than it should have. 2 years had passed, yet hearing it again still felt familiar enough to hurt. "How old is he?" The question hung in the air. Noah looked toward him. Ethan was staring at my son with an intensity that made my stomach twist. Not anger. Not hostility. Something else. Something far more dangerous. Recognition. Danielle stepped forward awkwardly. "Maybe I should take him outside." I nodded immediately. "Please." Noah frowned. "But Mom." "Just a few minutes." He hesitated, then allowed Danielle to take his hand. They walked toward the door. Noah glanced back one last time. Directly at Ethan. The room seemed to stop breathing again. Because Noah smiled. The same crooked smile Ethan used to wear whenever he thought he had won an argument. The same smile I had spent 5 years pretending not to notice. The door closed behind them. Silence returned. Ethan never took his eyes off the empty doorway. The attorney cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue with the paperwork. Ethan ignored him completely. His gaze finally shifted toward me. I had prepared myself for anger, for accusations, for cold indifference. I was not prepared for confusion. "Who is he?" he asked quietly. My heart hammered against my ribs. "That is none of your business." His jaw tightened. "None of my business?" The attorney shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I could practically feel everyone wishing they were somewhere else. Ethan leaned back slowly. The movement was controlled, but I knew him well enough to recognize what lived beneath that calm exterior. Questions. Hundreds of them. "Maya," he said, speaking my name for the first time that day. "How old is the boy?" I stared at the divorce papers lying on the table between us. The signatures. The legal language. The ending we had both agreed to. This was supposed to be simple. Sign. Leave. Move on. But nothing involving Ethan Nakamura had ever been simple. 5, I answered before I could stop myself. The number hit him like a physical shock. I saw it in his eyes. Saw him doing the math. Saw him calculating dates and memories and timelines. 5 years. 5 years ago had been the final year of our marriage. The year everything fell apart. The year I disappeared. His gaze dropped slowly to my stomach. The realization there was even worse. One child might have been coincidence. The second was impossible to ignore. For a long moment he simply stared. Then he whispered something so quietly that only I could hear it. What did I miss? And for the first time since walking into that room, I was not sure I wanted to know the answer either. I wanted to answer him. Part of me wanted to place every painful truth on that table, and finally stop carrying it alone. But another part remembered exactly why I had left. The attorney glanced between us nervously before sliding the documents closer. "Perhaps we should focus on the purpose of today's meeting." His voice sounded distant. Ethan barely acknowledged him. His eyes remained fixed on me, waiting, searching, looking for answers I had spent years avoiding. I folded my hands together beneath the table to stop them from trembling. "We are here to sign papers," I said quietly. "Nothing else." Ethan leaned forward. "Nothing else." His gaze flickered toward my stomach again. "You think I can sit here and pretend none of this exists?" The question landed harder than I expected. Because for 5 years that was exactly what I had done. Pretended. Pretended I was not raising a little boy who asked questions about his father. Pretended I did not wake up some nights remembering the life we almost had. Pretended I had moved on. The truth was much messier. Outside, rain streaked down the windows in silver lines. The city beyond looked blurred and distant. I focused on that view instead of Ethan's face. It was safer. "You gave up the right to ask questions a long time ago," I said. The room fell silent again. Ethan absorbed those words without reacting. That was always one of his most unsettling traits. He rarely showed emotion immediately. He carried it internally until it became impossible to ignore. Finally he exhaled slowly. "Then help me understand one thing." I closed my eyes briefly. "Ethan, just one thing." His voice softened. That somehow felt worse. "When you left, were you already pregnant?" My heart stopped. The question I had feared for years had finally arrived. I could feel the attorney's discomfort. I could feel the weight of every second stretching longer and longer. But most of all I could feel the memory. The airport terminal. The tears I refused to let fall. The positive test hidden inside my purse. The life-changing secret I carried as I boarded a plane and disappeared from Ethan's world forever. I opened my eyes. Ethan was watching me carefully. He already knew. Maybe not consciously, but some part of him already knew the answer. That was why he looked afraid. Before I could respond, the conference room door opened again. Danielle stepped inside, looking apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt." She hesitated. "Noah wanted me to tell you something." My pulse quickened instantly. "What happened?" "Nothing bad." She smiled awkwardly. "He just asked if the man in the room was the one from the picture." Every muscle in Ethan's body went still. The one from the picture. Danielle seemed to realize too late what she had said. Her expression shifted immediately. I should not have. But the damage was already done. Ethan's eyes widened. Slowly, almost carefully, he turned toward me. What picture? He asked. I could not breathe. Because Noah only kept one photograph beside his bed. One photograph he looked at every night before going to sleep. A photograph of a man he had never met. And now Ethan knew that man was him. I never answered his question. I could not. The air inside the conference room felt too thin, too heavy, somehow both at once. Danielle stood frozen near the door, clearly wishing she could take back what she had said. Ethan remained perfectly still. That was what frightened me most. Not anger. Not raised voices. Silence. The kind that meant his mind was working through pieces faster than anyone else in the room could follow. The attorney quietly gathered a few papers and pretended to review them. Nobody believed this meeting was about divorce anymore. Ethan's attention never left me. You kept my photograph. His voice was barely above a whisper. I looked away. The memory arrived without permission. A small apartment in Atlanta. Noah sitting cross-legged on his bed at 4 years old, holding the old framed picture he had found in a storage box. Who is he? He had asked. I had stared at the photograph for nearly a minute before answering. Someone important. It had been the safest truth I could give. Ethan exhaled slowly. Does he know who I am? I swallowed hard. No. The answer came too quickly. Too defensively. His eyes narrowed slightly. He knew I was hiding something. The problem was that I no longer remembered where the truth ended and the protection began. For years I had convinced myself I was shielding Noah from disappointment, from confusion, from questions I could not answer. But sitting across from Ethan now, watching the shock on his face, I wondered if I had also been protecting myself. Mom says my dad traveled far away. Noah's voice echoed inside my head from a conversation months earlier. Do you think he misses us? I had not known how to answer then either. Ethan slowly stood from his chair. The movement immediately drew every eye in the room. He walked toward the window overlooking the rain-soaked city. His reflection stared back from the glass. Powerful. Composed. Untouchable. Yet something in his posture seemed different now. Smaller somehow. Human. 5 years, he said quietly. 5 years of birthdays. Nobody spoke. 5 years of first days of school. His reflection lowered its gaze. 5 years of memories. My chest tightened, because he was counting moments he could never get back. Moments I had witnessed alone. The attorney finally cleared his throat. Perhaps we should schedule another meeting. Ethan ignored him. He turned toward me again. There was no accusation in his expression. That surprised me more than anything. Why did you never tell me? The question landed softly, almost gently, and somehow that hurt more. I looked down at my wedding ring resting beside the divorce papers. I had removed it that morning. The pale mark still lingered on my finger, a ghost of something that once existed. My throat tightened, because the answer was not simple. It was not one moment, one mistake, one decision. It was hundreds of painful choices stacked on top of each other until they became a wall neither of us knew how to climb. I opened my mouth to speak. Then my phone vibrated. The sound shattered the silence. I glanced at the screen and felt my blood run cold. The message contained only 6 words. He knows the truth now. Be careful. My hand tightened around the phone so quickly that the screen almost slipped from my fingers. The message disappeared a second later, but the damage was already done. Ethan noticed the change in my expression immediately. He always had. Even after 2 years apart, he could still read me far better than I wanted him to. What happened? He asked. I locked the screen and slipped the phone into my purse. Nothing. The lie sounded weak even to me. Ethan took a single step forward. Maya. The attorney abruptly stood. I think we should pause this meeting. For once everyone agreed. The atmosphere inside the room had shifted into something impossible to ignore. Danielle appeared in the doorway again, Noah standing beside her with a coloring book tucked under one arm. The moment I saw my son, every other concern fell away. I pushed myself to my feet and crossed the room. Noah looked up at me with those familiar dark eyes. Eyes that looked more like Ethan's every year. Are we done? He asked. Almost. He nodded seriously. Then his gaze drifted past me, straight to Ethan. Children notice things adults miss. They notice tension, curiosity, familiarity. Noah studied him for several seconds. Ethan did not look away. Neither did Noah. It felt like watching two mirrors facing each other. Finally, Noah smiled politely. "Hi." Ethan swallowed before answering. "Hello." The exchange lasted less than 3 seconds. Yet something about it seemed to shake Ethan more than everything else combined. Noah stepped closer to me and wrapped both arms around my waist as carefully as possible because of the baby. It was something he always did when he felt uncertain. Instinctively seeking comfort. Seeking home. Ethan watched every second of it. The attorney began collecting folders. Danielle quietly gathered Noah's backpack. The meeting was clearly ending. But Ethan remained frozen where he stood. As if walking away was no longer an option. My phone vibrated again. Another message. This time from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. Attached was a photograph. The image stole the breath from my lungs. A photograph from 6 years ago. Ethan and me standing on a pier overlooking the water in Seattle. Smiling. Happy. Taken months before everything fell apart. Beneath the picture were 4 words. Ask him about Olivia. My stomach dropped. Olivia. I had not heard that name in years. The room suddenly felt too small. Too warm. Too crowded. Because Olivia Hart had been the reason I left. The reason I believed my marriage was over. The reason I spent 5 years building a life alone. Ethan noticed my expression again. Who is Olivia? The question escaped before I could stop it. Ethan blinked. Genuine confusion crossed his face. What? I stared at him. Searching. Waiting. Watching for guilt. Regret. Recognition. Instead I found only bewilderment. Olivia Hart, I repeated. The name seemed to hit him like a puzzle piece from a forgotten box. His brow furrowed. Then slowly, very slowly, the color drained from his face. For the second time that day, Ethan looked like a man discovering that everything he believed about his past might have been a lie. For a moment nobody moved. The rain continued sliding down the glass outside, turning the skyline into a watercolor blur. Ethan stared at me as though the ground beneath him had shifted. Olivia worked for my company, he said slowly. Years ago. My pulse pounded in my ears. Worked for your company? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. That is not what the photographs showed. Ethan's expression tightened. What photographs? The question was immediate. Honest. I had spent years imagining this conversation, and somehow it was unfolding nothing like I expected. My fingers curled around the edge of the conference table. The photographs of you leaving hotels together. The messages. The emails. Every word tasted like an old wound reopening. Ethan looked genuinely lost. Then something flickered behind his eyes. Memory. He looked away for a second. Then another. The attorney quietly slipped out of the room. Danielle wisely took Noah farther down the hallway. Suddenly it was just us. 2 people sitting inside the wreckage of a marriage neither of us seemed to understand anymore. I never sent you any emails, Ethan said quietly. I laughed once. The sound was hollow. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to tell me what you received. His voice remained calm, but I could hear tension beneath it now. I opened my purse and pulled out my phone. For years I had kept the files hidden inside an old folder. I never knew why I kept them. Maybe because part of me needed proof that leaving had been justified. My hands trembled as I opened the images. The first photograph appeared on the screen. Ethan and Olivia entering a hotel lobby together. The second showed them seated at a restaurant. The third was the image that had shattered everything. Olivia resting her head against his shoulder. I handed him the phone. Ethan studied each photograph carefully. His face remained unreadable. Then he zoomed in. Closer. Closer still. His eyes narrowed. This is impossible. My chest tightened. I thought the same thing. No. He shook his head. Look at the date. I frowned. The timestamp sat in the corner exactly where it always had. Ethan turned the screen toward me. Look closer. My breath caught. The year. I had never noticed it before. The photograph was dated 6 months after I had already left New York. 6 months after our separation. 6 months after the day I stopped answering his calls. Confusion crashed through me. That cannot be right. Ethan continued scrolling. His expression darkened with every image. Finally, he stopped at the last attachment. The supposed email confession that had convinced me there was no saving our marriage. He stared at it for several long seconds. Then he whispered something that made my stomach drop. This signature is not mine. The room seemed to tilt. Every certainty I had carried for 5 years suddenly felt fragile. Ethan slowly lowered the phone. His eyes met mine. There was sadness there now. And something else. Determination. Maya, he said carefully. I think someone wanted us apart. Just then my phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. Another message. This one contained only a single sentence. You are finally asking the right questions. The message remained on my screen for several seconds before fading into silence. I stared at it, my reflection faintly visible against the glass. Questions. That was all I seemed to have now. Questions about Olivia. Questions about the photographs. Questions about the last 5 years of my life. Ethan stood across from me, equally unsettled. The certainty that had once defined him was gone. In its place was a man trying to understand how his family had vanished, without him ever knowing why. Show me every message, he said quietly. I should have refused. Every instinct told me to walk away, sign the papers, and leave the past buried where it belonged. But another part of me was tired. Tired of carrying old pain. Tired of wondering if I had made the right choice. Slowly, I handed him the phone. Ethan scrolled through years of saved screenshots, emails, and photographs. His expression grew darker with each file. Not angry, focused, like someone assembling a puzzle piece by piece. Finally, he stopped. Look at this. He pointed to an email I had read hundreds of times. The address is almost identical to mine. I frowned. At first glance it looked the same. Then I noticed a single extra character buried in the middle. One letter. One tiny difference. My stomach twisted. Ethan opened another message. Then another. The same pattern appeared again and again. Tiny details. Tiny inconsistencies. Things I had never questioned because I had been too hurt to look closely. Too heartbroken to investigate. 5 years ago I had believed what I saw because it matched what I feared. The realization left me feeling hollow. Someone planned this, Ethan said. His voice was calm, but I could hear the strain underneath. This was not an accident. The conference room suddenly felt very far away from the life I had built. Every sacrifice. Every lonely night. Every birthday celebration where Noah blew out candles without his father. All of it traced back to a possibility I had never allowed myself to consider. What if Ethan had been telling the truth all along? Before I could answer, the door opened. Noah ran inside holding a crayon drawing. Danielle followed a few steps behind, apologizing immediately. I am sorry. He would not wait any longer. Noah ignored the adults completely. He walked straight toward Ethan. My heart nearly stopped. Ethan froze too. Noah held out the paper. I made this. Ethan stared at the drawing. It showed a little house. A woman with curly hair. A small boy. A baby. And standing beside them was a tall man with dark hair. 4 figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. Ethan's fingers tightened around the page. Who is that? He asked softly. Noah smiled. That is my family. The room became perfectly silent. Then Noah pointed directly at the tall figure. That is my dad. Ethan looked up at me. His eyes were shining now. Not with certainty. Not yet. But with hope. And for the first time in 5 years, I realized hope might be even more dangerous than heartbreak. Hope frightened me because heartbreak only hurts once. Hope can hurt every day. Ethan continued staring at the drawing long after Noah lowered it. His fingers traced the edge of the paper carefully, as if it were something fragile, something priceless. Noah seemed completely unaware of the storm he had created. He simply smiled and pointed at each figure one by one. That is Mom. That is me. That is the baby. Then he pointed at the tall man again. And that is Dad. My throat tightened. Ethan looked at the drawing, then at Noah, then finally at me. There were 1,000 questions in his eyes. Questions neither of us knew how to answer. Danielle gently placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. Come on, buddy. Let us give the grown-ups a few minutes. Noah nodded and followed her toward the door. Halfway there he stopped and looked back. Can he keep the picture? He asked. The room went silent again. Ethan held his breath. I could see it. The uncertainty. The fear of hearing no. I glanced at the drawing. Crayon lines. Crooked figures. A child's version of the family he wished he had. Yes, I whispered. Noah grinned. Okay. Then he disappeared into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind him. Ethan lowered his gaze to the drawing once more. For several seconds he said nothing. Finally he folded the paper carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. The gesture felt strangely intimate. More emotional than any speech could have been. My phone vibrated again. A third message. My hands immediately grew cold. Ethan noticed. Another one? I nodded. Slowly I opened it. This time there was no photograph. No mysterious sentence. Only a location. An address in Seattle. Beneath it were 5 words. The answers are waiting here. My pulse accelerated. Seattle. The city where Ethan and I had spent our final anniversary together. The city where so many memories still lived. Ethan leaned closer. What is it? I hesitated before showing him the screen. His expression hardened with concentration. I know that address. You do. He nodded slowly. It belonged to Olivia. The name felt different now. Less like a wound. More like a mystery. Ethan rubbed a hand across his face. For the first time all day he looked exhausted. Not powerful. Not untouchable. Just tired. Maya, if someone spent years manipulating both of us, then there is a reason. I stared at the address. Questions swirled through my mind. Who sent the messages? Why now? Why wait until the day of our divorce? Outside, the rain had finally begun to ease. Sunlight pushed through the clouds in thin golden streaks. The city looked different. Brighter. As though the storm was ending. Ethan stepped closer to the table. Do not sign anything today. I looked down at the divorce papers. The signatures still missing. The future still undecided. For 5 years I had believed this day would bring closure. Instead it had delivered uncertainty. Ethan's voice softened. If there is even a chance we were lied to, we owe ourselves the truth. I wanted to argue. Wanted to protect my heart. Wanted to walk away before hope grew any larger. But then I remembered Noah's drawing. The 4 figures standing together beneath a yellow sun. And for the first time in years, I quietly pushed the unsigned divorce papers away from me. 3 weeks later, I stood on a quiet street in Seattle staring at a brick townhouse that looked far smaller than the mystery surrounding it. The address from the messages had led us here. Ethan stood beside me with his hands in his coat pockets while Noah chased pigeons along the sidewalk, and Danielle watched from a nearby bench. The rain was gone. The sky was clear. Yet my heart felt heavier than it had on the day I walked into that law office. Ethan glanced at the house. This is where Olivia lived. I nodded. Neither of us had spoken much during the flight. There had been too many possibilities. Too many answers waiting on the other side of the journey. The front door opened before we could knock. An elderly woman stepped outside. Her silver hair moved gently in the breeze. The moment she saw Ethan, her eyes filled with recognition. I wondered how long it would take. My pulse quickened. Ethan frowned. You know who I am? The woman smiled sadly. I know who both of you are. An hour later we sat inside her living room surrounded by old photographs and cardboard boxes. The woman introduced herself as Margaret, Olivia's aunt. She listened quietly as we explained everything. The emails, the photographs, the messages. When we finished, she disappeared into another room and returned carrying a worn folder. My hands trembled as she placed it on the coffee table. Olivia asked me to keep this if anything ever happened to her. Ethan exchanged a glance with me before opening it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. One fell open immediately. Olivia's handwriting covered every page. Ethan began reading aloud. With each sentence, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Olivia had discovered someone inside Ethan's company was manipulating communications between us. She had tried to expose it. She had gathered evidence. She had even written multiple warnings addressed directly to me. None of them ever arrived. Tears blurred my vision as the truth finally emerged. Olivia had never been the other woman. She had been trying to help save our marriage. Ethan lowered the final letter slowly. Neither of us spoke for a long time. 5 years. 5 years lost because of lies neither of us created. Noah's laughter drifted through the open window from the small garden outside. The sound broke the silence. Ethan looked toward it, then toward me. I cannot get those years back. His voice was quiet, honest. But I would spend the rest of my life making new ones if you let me. My eyes filled with tears. Not because the pain disappeared. Not because forgiveness suddenly became easy. But because for the first time in years the future felt larger than the past. Months later, in a hospital room filled with morning sunlight, our daughter finally entered the world. Noah sat proudly beside the bed. Ethan stood near me holding the tiny bundle carefully in his arms. His eyes never left her face. Then he looked at me. The same question that had once carried fear now carried wonder. Is she really mine? I laughed through tears. Yes. Ethan smiled and kissed our daughter's forehead. Noah leaned closer to meet his little sister. And as sunlight filled the room, the family from the crayon drawing finally became real.